Thank you very much for joining us on G&T this morning.
A pleasure.
You've had a number of defections, some of them very prominent from the SNP to Alba, to members of the British Parliament so far. And you've obviously announced one or two more this morning. Just tell me, what is the difference between Alba and the SNP then? Why would anyone need to defect from one party to the other?
Well, there is an opportunity that every independence supporter in Scotland should be excited by. And that is for a list party to gain representation in the Scots Parliament. And instead of wasting list votes with the SNP, because the SNP could get 1 million votes on the regional list and elect no MSPs from it at all, then there's the chance and opportunity of electing more independent supporting MSPs and building a supermajority in the Scots Parliament. That's the political opportunity that independent supporters are sensing, why so many are now flocking to the Alba standard.
That I understand, but you can build a perfectly cogent and powerful list of supporters, your name's on it, for example, without having to bring over defections from the SNP, can't you? Why defect?
Well, I'd have thought that a number of reasons. One, I would hope that every Scottish nationalist at Westminster is looking forward to transferring into the Scots Parliament. I mean, after all, they're in Westminster not to settle down, but to settle up, as the great Winnie Ewing once put it. And so I'd hope and believe that a Scottish nationalist at Westminster will be looking to the day that he or she would transfer to the Scots Parliament. And it's quite reasonable that Kenny MacAskill, Neale Hanvey think that that's going to be within this term of the Parliament, given the political opportunity that we now sense. So I think it's important that Alba builds as a political party and has a calibre of candidates that people recognise, because that helps reinforce the opportunity and demonstrates that we're not launching this Alba Party as a one-man band, but it's actually an orchestra of different talents, different abilities that will be extraordinarily attractive to the people of Scotland.
And just to listen out, say it again. Just for listeners outside of Scotland, can you explain what a supermajority is and the significance of it?
Well, probably the easiest way is this. I mean, I was elected twice as First Minister of Scotland. On the first occasion, it was a plurality, because remember, this is a proportional parliament in Scotland, not a first past the post parliament. So the SNP in 2007 became the biggest party, and we got 47 seats. And the Labour Party, if I remember correctly, got 46. We had 47 seats at a parliament, 129, and I became First Minister, I think, with 49 votes out of 129, because I had more votes than anyone else. Now, that was great, and we ran, I hope and believe, a very competent, efficient administration, which did us a lot of good. But I have to say, in terms of progressing the constitutional argument, in terms of negotiations and discussions with first Gordon Brown and then David Cameron at Westminster, I was rather encumbered by I had to keep looking behind me at a parliament which wasn't convinced by the independence argument, where there was a majority of unionists, of Labour, Tory, Liberals in that parliament. And that tells you the opportunity we have now, because if we can put into the Scots Parliament, not a bare majority of independent supporting MSPs, but a massive majority, perhaps 80, perhaps 90 out of 129, it immeasurably strengthens the First Minister's hand in negotiations with Westminster, because Boris Johnson wants to cast this debate as the Prime Minister against the First Minister, as the Conservative Party in Great Britain and Northern Ireland against the SNP in Scotland. Much more difficult for Boris Johnson if the debate comes between the Tory Prime Minister and Scotland's Parliament representing Scotland's people. That's a hugely different argument and rebalances the power equation between Scotland and Westminster.
Okay, I accept you could call it just a big majority or a very big majority. There's nothing special about the word supermajority, but there is a flip side to all this, isn't it? And one that you'll understand. And that is, by having two independence parties, you are making the independence movement look split. You are making it look like there are two tribes rather than one, confusing people and thinking people who might want to vote for independence may not necessarily want to vote for a rabble fighting each other.
Well, of course, if we look at the argument another way, I mean, there are three unionist parties in Scotland. I mean, there's probably more, but there's three reasonably sized ones. There's the Tory party, the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats. So the unionist perspective in Scotland comes from different points of view. I mean, yesterday, in response to Alba's emergence, Douglas Ross, the leader, I think, of the Scottish Conservative Party, was calling on Labour and Liberals to join together with the Conservatives to present a pan-unionist front to confront the threat, as he put it, of Alba. Well, good luck to him. He's got a perfect entitlement to do that. So the unionist side comes from different perspectives, and it's not a disadvantage for the independent side to come from different perspectives, particularly if, like Alba, we're putting forward that argument in an entirely constructive way. I mean, for example, I'm openly saying to people, vote SNP in the constituency section of the Scottish Parliament ballot. We're not standing in that. But vote Alba in the regional list section, and that way we're going to get more independents supporting MSPs into the Parliament and build that big majority or super majority of independents supporting members of the Scottish Parliament.
Okay, when do you want a referendum for Scottish independence? Say you get your big majority, supermajority, whatever word we want to use for it. When should the Scottish Parliament, the First Minister, whoever that might be, probably going to be Nicola Sturgeon, when should they call that referendum?
Well, I think the priority, quite reasonably, I think everybody accepts, is to get us through the pandemic, and we're not through it yet, and to have the economic recovery initiative from the pandemic. And that the independence and the constitutional question is a really important one that has to take place in that term of the Scottish Parliament. So the actual position will be to persuade Westminster to engage in the negotiations for independence and to get on with it in that timescale. And I think there's an infinitely better chance of doing that when Boris Johnson's having to face down a parliament as opposed to having to confront a single political party.
Right, so you've just given me a timescale of 5 years, I think. Give or take a few more months to sort out the pandemic. That might take for the end of this year. But when do you want a referendum? Can you be more specific than 5 years?
Well, I want Scotland to start negotiating the process of independence from the Parliament just as soon as we are through the pandemic. But I also recognise that we're not engaging with a willing partner in Westminster. Every possible indication we have is that Boris Johnson will want to say no to the SNP, already has said no to the SNP's proposals. Therefore, to alter that balance of power, his ability to say no to the SNP, we have to put him in a position he's saying no to Parliament and the Scottish people. So we have to understand that there's a variety of ways to get the democratic legitimacy to move to independence. When I was First Minister, I was able to persuade Mr. Cameron to have a Section 30 referendum. That was the route. But that wasn't something he suddenly offered out of thin air. That's something which had to be negotiated. So we should be negotiating as a parliament as quickly as possible, using that array of independence supporting parties in that parliament to give the authority to say Scotland's parliament, newly elected, representing Scotland's people, wants you to start negotiating about Scotland's independence. And then we'll see what comes out of that negotiation, whether it be a Section 30 referendum, whether it be a plebiscite organised by the Scottish Parliament, whether it be mobilising international opinion and international legal opinion on Scotland's right of self-determination, whether it be peaceful street demonstrations, whether it be the galvanization of Scottish opinion. Any and all of these things are tactics to achieve the strategy, which is to achieve Scottish independence.
Well, let's talk about a few of those options, because you know Boris Johnson has already turned down a second Scottish independence referendum. He said, and in fact, I think you said at the time, this was once in a generation and the generation is yet to expire. So say Boris Johnson turns down that Scottish government, that supermajority Scottish government's request for a referendum. Do you go ahead and hold your own? Do you hold your mass protest? Do you create a movement to force the British government? What is your next move?
Well, let's take these things in turn. The forecast that referendum in Scotland was once in a generation event. That was looking at the period between 1979 and 1997 in terms of the devolution referendum, and was always put in the context that the Scottish people at any election had the right to accelerate that process, had the right to elect MSPs with a mandate to push the constitutional question forward. Just as in Westminster, no Prime Minister can dictate what the next Prime Minister or the next Parliament does, then similarly, no First Minister in Scotland can dictate what the Scottish people decide at a future election. You stand for a mandate for one parliamentary term. So it's up to the Scottish people, the pace at which they wish to go in the constitutional question. I mean, as a great Irish leader once put it, that no man can dictate the pace and the path of a nation. No person has the right to say, this far shall thou go and no further. And that is true in all countries, in all nations, and all democratic politics. And therefore, the democratic politics that Scotland is about to engage in is to put this to the test, Tom. What pace and how do the Scottish people want to advance the independence cause? Now, you say Boris Johnson will inevitably say no. Well, he may have already said no to a political party, the SNP. I'm saying to you, he's going to find it much more difficult when he's facing a parliament representing an entire nation.
If you get your referendum, be it a Section 31 agreed by the British government or one that hasn't been agreed, a plebiscite I think you might have mentioned, do you want to play a part in the campaign? Should Alba be forerunners in that game? Do you want to lead that independence campaign in any referendum?
Well, Alba is not trying to be the government of Scotland. The Alba Party has no pretensions about being the next Scottish government. We want to make a contribution both to that campaign and a contribution to the ideas which are necessary. We want to contribute to the ideas about necessary to recover from the pandemic. We also want to contribute ideas to the formulation of the new independence platform. When you mentioned 2014 a few minutes ago, as you and I both know, the world has changed in 2014. Many of the certainties in the background that we had in 2014 are no longer the case. We see the history swept away in so many things, not just the nightmare of the last year of pandemic, but we are now, as the United Kingdom, out with the European Union against the will of the Scottish people, with all the economic consequences which are going to exacerbate the consequences of pandemic. That is the new reality. Therefore, the programme and platform for independence has to address that new reality of politics, not what was the case back in 2014. And if Alba can contribute to that platform, we think we can, then we're certainly willing to do it. But that's the essential prerequisite, in my estimation, for winning any democratic test of the Scottish people. The Scottish people expect there to be that platform for independence facing the realities of today and the future, not what pertained 7 years ago.
My question was to you, though, as well. Do you, Alex Salmond, want to lead this second Scottish independence referendum campaign, or do you accept that's the job for Nicola Sturgeon? It'll be one of the two of you, won't it?
No, I accept that's the job of the First Minister of Scotland. The leader of the largest independence party will lead the independence campaign. And I think that is, well, nothing's a certainty in life or politics, as you're well aware, Tom, but that looks very heavy odds on to be Nicola Sturgeon, because the SNP are likely to sweep the country as far as the constituency ballot is concerned. What we believe is that Alba can make a contribution by winning regional list seats in a way that the SNP can't do. I mean, there was a Survation poll out, and I think it was Thursday, where the SNP were going to win 67 out of the constituency seats, which are 72. All but 5 of the constituency seats would fall to the SNP. But despite on that poll getting 1 million votes, approximately 39%, which would approximate to 1 million votes, they were forecast to win not a single seat in the regional list section. Now, that is the section of the proportional system that Alba is moving into, and will be able to win seats and build that supermajority for independence.
That bit I understand, but let me just press you a little bit on this. You have had a veritable falling out with Nicola Sturgeon. I think that is very obvious for us all to see, having heard what you've both said about each other over the last 3 years. Come any referendum campaign, how do you expect the Scottish people to take you both seriously, standing on the same platforms together, holding hands again together, or could you never see that happening?
Well, do you mean that we'd be facing the Douglas Ross of the Conservative Party standing on a platform of Anas Sarwar of the Labour Party? The essence of a referendum campaign or any democratic test for independence is people who've had differences have to sink their differences and campaign together. And I'm certainly well prepared to do that. That is not incidentally because of any personality aspect, because this is much more important than personalities. This is about the future of a nation.
Make it clear,
Alex,
make it clear you're prepared to forgive Nicola Sturgeon for all the ills you've accused her of in the past.
No, the word forgiveness is yours, not mine. I mean, I'm prepared to campaign. It's not a question. I'm not saying forgive. I'm saying, look, these sort of things, when it's the future of a country that's at stake, you have to put the past behind you and campaign for the future. So it's not about the differences you will have with people. It's whether you can establish a common aim, a common goal for the nation, and be prepared to put that first, and whatever personal differences have been come entirely secondary. And I'm saying that is what I would do. And incidentally, I believe that's what Nicola Sturgeon would do as well, because some things are a lot bigger than personalities or individual disagreements. And the future of a country is certainly one of these.
Well, I have to say, and you'll know this as well, she's not given a huge indication of that yet herself. You've seen the SNP's reaction to your announcement on Friday. This is the party you led for 20 years, and you've seen Nicola Sturgeon's personal reaction as well. And she said, in case anyone didn't hear it, there are significant questions about the appropriateness of Alex Salmond's return to public office, given the concerns raised about his past conduct. What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is I am not going to say a word in this campaign denigrating either the SNP or indeed any other party. I'm going to say lots of things about the future of Scotland, about Alba's contribution to the future as a new party offering a new perspective to assist the Scottish people to achieve Scottish independence. That's what I'm going to spend the campaign doing, and I'm not rising to any bait whatsoever. I mean, sometimes when something happens, I mean, I saw a comment from the SNP saying this was a predictable development, the emergence of Alba. Yeah, okay. But usually what you do in predictions is you predict it before the event, not say it was predictable after the event. So let's just assume that the developments of Friday was a surprise to most people in Scottish politics. Then, of course, it takes a bit of time for people to accept it's happening and to gauge their reaction properly. So let's just assume that that was a first reaction. And when a more measured reaction comes in, then people will engage in the sort of debate that the people of Scotland are entitled to in an election campaign. And certainly, as far, I mean, I can only say what Alba is going to do, and Alba is going to be conducting that debate in an entirely positive fashion. There won't be a single statement from Alba, not a single statement from any of our candidates that does other and concentrates on our aims, which are one, to build a supermajority, two, to contribute to economic recovery from the pandemic, and three, to help build that new independence platform to face the political realities of 2021, not the realities of 2014.
Nicola Sturgeon has raised your own character, your own past behaviour as an issue. Now, you've yourself have said, and I quote you in 2018, "I'm no saint, I've got flaws, I've made mistakes in my life, political and personal." Is it not time for you to once and for all address those mistakes? Say you're sorry for whatever you might have done. It wasn't criminal, a court established that, but just to say sorry to anyone you might have offended.
Well, look, everything I've said previously, and if you check the record, you'll know what it is. That all stands. That's been done. But we've also had two courts, two judges, the highest civil court in Scotland, the highest criminal court in Scotland, and the verdict's in. The jury has decided. We've also had two investigations and one inquiry into the government's unlawful policy. That has also come in. Now, my point is what I'm saying is I'm prepared to accept the results of all of these inquiries, the two court judgments, the jury verdict, everything. The things I agree with, the things I don't agree with. And the only outstanding features are a civil action against the Scottish Government, because that arose from the recommendations, or at least from the findings of unanimously the parliamentary inquiry, and a report to the police about a leak which was distressing to everyone concerned, to the Daily Record newspaper in August 2018, which is prima facie a criminal leak, and which was denounced by the parliamentary inquiry in a what seemed like a recommendation from the Hamilton inquiry that the matter should be reported to police. So I've reported that to the police. That's how things should be taken forward. But the rest of it, that is now a platform accepting these things to move on and to talk about the future of Scotland. And that's what I'm going to do.
I understand your legal action. You detailed that last week. But the one thing, Alex, you just haven't ever said is, I'm sorry to anybody. Do you feel no need to make any apologies at all before you can move on?
I'm sorry, Tom, you haven't researched the issue very closely enough. And if you do, then you'll see the statement you've made is just not accurate. But I'm telling you what I'm going to do for the course of the campaign, which is to carry forward the argument for the future of Scotland. But listen, if you or anyone else has a beef with these things, then you should take it up with a jury. And I'll tell you something, most fair-minded people in this country accept jury verdicts.
Okay, we'll move on from that. That was a criminal matter. Perhaps we're talking about more of a moral matter, but I don't think you want to go there. And I'll look up your previous comments. Let me just ask you one final question. What's your ideal election result in this election in May? Is it a situation where the SNP get close to majority and then your Alba list candidates push them over the edge to have that independent supermajority? Or is it a flat out SNP majority topped up by Alba candidates? Because there are those, and you know they exist, saying this is all about Alex Salmond wanting to have the whip hand over Nicola Sturgeon. You'd love her to fall just short, so she needs to take dictation from you after all these years of doling it out to you.
Well, I think if we take that Salvation poll, I mean, if the SNP sweep the constituency section, then that will be ideal, because that means there'll be more seats for Alba in the regional list section, because the remarkable thing about that poll, as I've mentioned, is that the SNP, despite having 1 million votes, would get no seats at all in the regional list section. So that would be a huge opportunity for the independence movement to back Alba. And that would be an ideal scenario. But listen, you don't get election results by forecasting ideal scenarios. You get election results by working hard, by staying positive, by keeping to your agenda, by not being deflected, by offering something that inspires hope and understanding of the people, by conducting a debate in the manner you should conduct it, and by pointing out the opportunities for our country to become independent. Because striving for the independence of your country is just about the noblest cause there is.
Alex Salmond, thank you for joining us on G&T this morning.
A great pleasure, Tom.